When Pac-Man was released in arcades on May 22, 1980, it took the world by storm. Its premise was simple. It aspired to be a game that would appeal to men and women alike, to have a simple set of rules, and have an easily recognizable character. While most popular video games of the time were space shooters, Pac-Man's undeniable charm and addictive gameplay sparked a social phenomenon called Pac-Man fever, and helped it become one of the most recognizable video game brands ever.
The first thing that comes to mind is actually the theme, the song that starts up when you're playing the game for the first time. It's that song. That song, if you hear it, there's like some Pavlovian response that I'm like back at an arcade and like I should put a quarter in something.
Waka 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 waka.
I remember running off and spending a ton of money on it. Not really getting, just kind of being blown away because of the color.
Yeah, just that game screen, just that blue, there's that real vibrant blue coming through with the yellow in there. But yeah, that's the game screen and that waka waka sound.
So when I think about Pac-Man, I think the first thing I remember is actually the very first time I encountered a Pac-Man arcade machine. I remember we were on a family holiday at a campsite, and it was chucking down with rain like almost the entire week that we were there, and so we were spending a lot of our time in this arcade. And I just remember seeing Pac-Man and just thinking, oh my god, like there's a game where you don't just shoot aliens. Like this is totally different.
Pac-Man was really the first game to kind of have that mass appeal, and I think part of that is that it didn't involve bullets. There was actually something really clever about the way Pac-Man is set up.
As the world's fascination with Pac-Man grew exponentially, arcade cabinets began to appear, not only in video arcades, but in businesses everywhere.
My aunt ran kind of a hunting lodge up in northern Minnesota, in the middle of nowhere. And this was literally like there wasn't a grocery store for 50 miles, but in the middle of this hunting lodge, they had a Pac-Man machine.
My regular Pac-Man machine was at Cattleman's, I believe. There was this restaurant in Santa Rosa. There was a steakhouse my parents would go to like once every month or two. And I loved going to Cattleman's because they had a cocktail table Pac-Man that I would run over to. And
I really thought the sit-down version of it was really cool because it was like, hey, I can eat on this thing while I am playing. And to me, that was really neat.
One thing that I loved about the original Pac-Man cabinet art, when I was a kid, it threw me for a loop.
And Pac-Man was just kind of like this bipedal thing.
This weird yellow spermy with feet.
And he's like staring up at a ghost like, oh, you look delicious.
The worldwide hunger for Pac-Man quickly went beyond the video arcades. The iconic yellow character began to show up everywhere, in breakfast cereals, on lunchboxes, clothing and toys everywhere, and even on Saturday morning cartoons.
Something that a lot of people, maybe younger people remember from The Simpsons, like right around 1989, where basically you could get Bart Simpson, anything Brandon Simpsons. It was like, Pac-Man was like that. You get Pac-Man pasta, you get Pac-Man cereal, you get Pac-Man telephone.
It was a thing back in the day.
I probably owned like a lunchbox or a pencil case for school or something like that.
I had a Pac-Man Pez dispenser.
Yeah, I remember it just being kind of just market overload. Like I said, it was like The Simpsons in in the early 90s. It was like you get anything.
I had a little bit of an addiction, a little bit of a problem.
There was in my house the Pac-Man Fever album.
the tour de force of Pac-Man craziness, which was that song. It's like, really? Like, I know video games were new and cool and everything back then, and people were just getting into them and finding them. But Pac-Man Fever, like that sounded like a bad idea from the start.
One of the most horrible things to come out of Pac-Man Fever, other than that god-awful song, was the cartoon. And what struck me most about the cartoon is, why does Pac-Man have a hat?
The plot of which each week revolved around how do we get power pellets and kill the ghosts. It was like a bad Scooby-Doo episode.
Because that cartoon's kind of violent. Like if you go back and watch that now, and it's on like Netflix, so you totally can. That thing's kind of raw.
It was kind of disturbing.
It's like those dudes are chasing that dude, and then he gets the thing, and then he goes and like eats him.
And like Pac-Man is just suddenly all bleh.
Well, looking back on that cartoon now, it's kind of harsh,
Atari launched the 2600 home gaming system with the promise of bringing arcade games to the home, and with that, bringing Pac-Man out of the arcades and into the living room. But due to limitations of the system's hardware, and compounded by a very short production schedule, the home version of Pac-Man was a critical failure and a disappointment to many consumers.
So I actually remember when my family got Pac-Man for the Atari 2600, and I remember being really excited because it was kind of like the first big arcade to home port.
It's truly awful. It's one of those things that wasn't good then, and it certainly has no hope of holding up now.
I remember getting it, being super excited because it came in the mail, ripping that thing open. So I slammed it in the machine, started playing, and was totally devastated.
You know, yeah, it kind of had the basic gameplay intact, but it was kind of the first in a long string of arcade to home ports that I was just really, really disappointed with.
The 2600 couldn't handle rendering every ghost on the screen at the same time. So they blinked because every frame had a different ghost that would display on your screen. So the end result is that they blinked all over the screen.
It was one of those things where you start playing it and you try and convince yourself this was totally worth the purchase and I'm fine, this is awesome. But after either my brother, my sister, or my mom, somebody just kind of came by and it's like, well, was it worth it? And I started to say yes, but I'm like, no.
So yeah, I remember hearing it and I was kind of bummed about that, but it was still like I was sitting there and I'm like, I still got Pac-Man in my house though.
It was terrible, but it was also free.
Like it's a fascinating story, and here they had like, straight up like quarter shortages and like all kinds of crazy stuff, I kind of wish that I would have been around and like, an able-bodied adult to kind of experience that. I try to equate that to what it's like for us nowadays, and it's like, we get crazy about Halo, and we get crazy about Street Fighter, or we get crazy about, obviously, Grand Theft Auto, and we line up and do all that stuff, but to be able to go to the arcade back then and like have that be like the craziest, awesomest thing ever, that was a totally different thing that just doesn't really exist now, and I think for Pac-Man Fever, it's like, that definitely deserves a place in history.